Dust devils danced across the parched earth as Silas Blackwood squinted at the approaching stagecoach. The midday sun beat down on Copper Canyon, baking the wooden buildings and turning the dust to a fine, shimmering haze. Silas, a former cavalry stutter and ranch hand, wasn't expecting anyone. The state line hadn't regularly serviced Copper Canyon in months, not since the Apache raids had intensified. He's been hired by the town to keep an eye on things, a vague title given to a man who mostly watched empty horizons. The stage pulled up with a groan of leather and the rattle of iron-bound wheels. A single passenger dismounted, a woman draped in a heavy traveling cloak, her face obscured by a white-brimmed hat. She was pale, and moved with an unnatural stiffness. Two burly men, clearly hired protection, flanked her, their hands hovering near the butts of their revolvers. "Silas Blackwood?" the woman asked, her voice surprisingly melodic despite the weariness in it. "That's me," Silas replied, tipping his hat. He sized her up. She looked like she'd seen more than a woman her age should. "You expecting someone?" "I am," she said, her gaze fixed on the town. "My name is Elara Thorne. I'm here to see Mayor Harding." Silas frowned. Harding hadn't mentioned a visit. The mayor was a cautious man, slow to trust strangers. This felt unusual. He escorted Elara and her guides to the mayor's office, a cramped room above the general store. Harding, a stout man with a perpetually worried expression, rose to greet them. "Miss Thorne," with a surprise, "we weren't expecting you." "I understand," Elara replied, her voice calm. "I've come regarding a matter of some urgency." The matter turned out to be a map detailing the location of a vein of silver richer than anything found in the surrounding territories. It was, according to Elara, property of her late father, a geologist who had been prospecting in Arizona decades ago. The map had been entrusted to her, and she believed Copper Canyon was the logical place to stake her claim. Harding listened intently, his eyes darting between Elara and the map. Greed flickered behind his cautious gaze. Copper Canyon was struggling. The drought had withered the crops, and the dwindling livestock were barely enough to feed the town. Silver would be a godsend. "This is remarkable, Miss Thorne," Harding finally said, "but there's been a lot of activity around these parts. Claim jumpers, claim squatters, dangerous men." "I am aware," Elara said, and she brought forth another man from the shadows of the stagecoach. A man with a scarred face and cold, assassin eyes. "This is Rhys Walker, my associate. He will ensure my claim is protected." Rhys Walker was a reputation. A man who collected debts in blood and left trails of whispered fear in his wake. Silas watched him carefully. Walker wasn't just protection, he was a statement. Elara Thorne wasn't messing around. The arrival of Elara and Walker sent ripples through Copper Canyon. The prospect of silver rekindled hope, but it also ignited a simmering tension. Old grudges resurfaced, and the whispers of fortune mingled with the threat of violence. Among those watching the situation with keen interest was Jedediah Jed Keller, a wiry, quick-witted outlaw with a reputation for both cunning and ruthlessness. Jed had been operating in the region for years, and he knew the terrain better than anyone. He also knew that silver was worth more than a man's life. "Looks like we got a fancy lady trying to play in our sandbox," Jed said to his partner, a hulking brute named Cyrus. They were holed up in a dilapidated shack on the outskirts of town, observing the unfolding drama through a pair of binoculars. "Silver changes things," Cyrus grunted. "Folks'll do anything for a piece of that." "Exactly," Jed grinned, sharpening his bowie knife. "And we're gonna make sure we get a substantial piece." The days that followed were fraught with suspense. Elara, under Walker's watchful eye, began the process of officially staking her claim. Silas, still acting as the town's unofficial guardian, found himself caught between his duty to protect the innocent and his growing suspicion that something was amiss. He's been watching Walker, and something about the man's demeanor felt predatory. Then, the first act of violence occurred. A young boy scavenging for scraps near Elara's temporary camp was found murdered, his body left as a grim warning. "Apache," Harding declared, his face pale with fear. But Silas wasn't so sure. The kill was too clean, too deliberate. It lacked the savage frenzy of a true Apache raid. "I don't think it was Apache," Silas said to Harding. "This was someone trying to send a message." He's been questioned by Walker, who remained frustratingly tight-lipped about the investigation. "Copper Canyon is rife with unsavory characters, Mr. Blackwood. You would be wise to be vigilant." Silas continued his own investigation, questioning townsfolk and piecing together fragments of information. He's been finding that Rhys Walker's reputation hadn't been entirely unfounded. The man seemed to know everyone, and everyone seemed to be afraid of him. Then he noticed something. A small, almost imperceptible detail, the distinct brand on the murdered boy's arm. A brand he recognized. It was the mark of the Rattlesnake Gang, a notorious group of outlaws known for their ruthlessness and their penchant for extortion. Silas confronted Walker with his discovery. The Rattlesnake Gang was involved in the boy's death. You knew that, didn't you? Walker's expression didn't change. You jumped to conclusions, Mr. Blackwood. The Rattlesnake Gang operates far beyond Copper Canyon. But you don't, Silas pressed. You're involved somehow. Walker chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. You are a persistent man, Mr. Blackwood, perhaps too persistent. The confrontation escalated, and a brief but intense struggle ensued. Silas managed to disarm Walker, but not before the man managed to trigger a small, almost silent explosion. The ground beneath Silas's feet gave way, sending him tumbling into a hidden cellar. He landed hard, knocking the breath from his lungs. As his vision cleared, he realized he was in a makeshift laboratory, filled with strange equipment and stacks of geological surveys. He's been finding a ledger on a table, and he began to read it. The entries detailed Elara Thorne's movements, the town's vulnerabilities, and Walker's meticulously planned operation. The ledger revealed the truth. Elara Thorne wasn't interested in the silver itself. She was interested in controlling Copper Canyon. The silver vein was a smokescreen, a distraction. Walker was her enforcer, and the Rattlesnake Gang were her pawns. Suddenly, he heard footsteps above him. Walker descended into the cellar, a cruel smile on his face. You should have stayed out of this, Mr. Blackwood. You're using the silver to manipulate the town, Silas accused, to take control. Control is the ultimate prize, Walker said, drawing his revolver. Before Walker could fire, the cellar door burst open. Rhys Jed's partner stood there, his face contorted in a snarl. Jed, meanwhile, was fighting with the town guard, attempting to secure the town's entrances and exits. It turned out that Jed had his own reasons for wanting to thwart Walker's plan. He's been found that Walker had double-crossed him, promising a share of the silver but intending to cut him off entirely. A chaotic gunfight erupted in the cellar, the echoes reverberating through the town. Silas, using his skills as a former scout, managed to disarm Walker and send him sprawling. Jed wrestled with Walker, the two men locked in a brutal struggle for dominance. The battle spilled out onto the town square, where a full-scale confrontation was underway. The town guard, led by Sheriff Harding, fought desperately to maintain order. The Rattlesnake Gang, caught between Walker and Jed, was scattered and demoralized. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the fighting subsided. Walker, disarmed and defeated, was taken into custody. The Rattlesnake Gang was routed. Elara Thorne, witnessing the collapse of her plan, disappeared into the shadows, her fate unknown. As the dust settled, Sheriff Harding addressed the weary townsfolk. We had survived a dark chapter in Copper Canyon's history, he announced, but the threat is not entirely gone. Silas watched Elara's stagecoach leave town, a single thought echoing in his mind: this wasn't over. The true players were still at large, and the silver vein, far from being a blessing, might prove to be a curse. He looked out across the horizon, the setting sun casting long shadows across the desert. A new dust devil spiraled into being, a fleeting phantom against the darkening sky. He knew with a certainty that settled heavy in his bones that Copper Canyon's troubles were far from finished.